Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Uvas. I work in DNR's egg non-point source program, and I help out with the NPRA research project. Um, what we're going to do today is record a brief tutorial answering a few questions about Silurian sample points. Um, those questions are: which performance standards or manure management prohibitions are we assessing for these kinds of sample sites? When should I request an NMP? And when should I conduct an inspection to assess compliance? The only resource we're going to need is the new data guidelines document. This was shared with county conservationists in an email from the NPRA project team on April 17th. As an attachment in that email, if you're not familiar with this document, check it out. It should be pretty useful. There's a lot to it too. And that's why we've got tutorials like this trying to break it down into bite-sized pieces for people to use and process. So to get started, um, let's understand this document a bit more. I'm going to zoom in. This document is a resource developed by DATCAP and DNR staff for county or DNR staff to use when gathering information or new data to complete the NPRA project's Qualtrics questionnaire for each sample site. And it's going to provide recommendations for how to assess compliance with each performance standard or manure management prohibition for the NPRA research project. We're going to start with Silurian. That's what this tutorial is going to be. Then we're going to do follow-up tutorials for both cropland and livestock operation sample sites. New data guidelines has 3 sections if you're looking in the headers or like the table of contents in this navigation pane. Control F will open that, by the way, if you're looking for it, and then go over to headings. What you want to do is, to do Silurian, we're going to start with the new data guidelines Silurian. Our site selection methodology for the NPRA research project is going to have identified cropland sites in the 16 Silurian counties that have mapped Silurian bedrock within 20 feet of the soil surface. So that covers most of the applicability criteria for this standard. However, as you're working through it, you still need to ensure that manure is being mechanically applied and that the cropland hasn't been converted to another non-agricultural use, like a housing development or new quick trip, for example. So those are the other 2 changes that our site selection methodologies couldn't catch. If for some reason, the site has been converted to another use, or it's only refusing commercial fertilizer applications, no animal ag connected applying manure or something like that, you can determine that this performance standard is not applicable and indicate why in the Qualtrics questionnaire. But let's assume it is applicable and move on to the next step. Since it's a Silurian site, the only performance standard being assessed is the Silurian Bedrock Targeted Performance Standard. Even though other cropland performance standards from NR 151 might apply for this research project, the science only asks us to assess the Silurian Bedrock Targeted Performance Standard for sites that are Silurian sites. They have for example, the site ID would start with an S followed by a 4-digit number. Those Silurian sites are only the Silurian Bedrock. And that recommended assessment process, following through on this, is going to help us understand when to request a nutrient management plan and when to make on-site observations from public right-of-way or from an inspection. So we can follow through this, and essentially the recommendation for Silurian bedrock sample sites requires that there needs to be an NMP in hand to review to make a compliance assessment. So if no NMP is on file, that you could use the information we gathered when we were identifying the sample site in the last tutorial. That's parcel ID, landowner name, and landowner mailing address to follow up and request a copy of the nutrient management plan from the landowner or crop producer operating the site. In situations where they have a nutrient management plan and they submit it to the county, you can move forward with that assessment. We're going to cover that next. But in situations where that crop producer writes back to the county and says, hey, I don't have a nutrient management plan, or I have a nutrient management plan, but I don't want to share it. Okay. And in those situations, you can enter that information in Qualtrics. If you know the site does not have a nutrient management plan, then you know that's non-compliance. If you know the site has a nutrient management plan, but you're unable to review it, then that's going to be a situation where you're unable to review it. And you can indicate that in Qualtrics as well and explain why. That's all good data. But assuming that you either have a nutrient management plan in hand, maybe you've never reviewed it before, um, or that the crop producer, when asked, does provide a copy of their nutrient management plan or a few select documents from it, you can move on to the next step to assess compliance. What you're going to need to do is review some of those NMP materials, like the nutrient management checklist, to confirm that the NMP is being written and implemented to comply with these requirements. To make that a little lighter of a lift, there are some spreadsheets, or I'm sorry, checklists in this assistance for county section. I'm going to click there now. It's essentially a place to take notes and some plain language questions to help you unpack what assessing compliance with a Silurian Bedrock Targeted Performance Standard looks like. It's hashed here because I've got it open. So I'm going to move over to this. This is what it looks like. There's a field up top to capture information about the sample site. Part of that we might have already done in our last step. And then it's just 4 fundamental questions to help you assess compliance. Some people have said that a format like this is going to be really helpful for them to review NMPs, take notes on like these checklists, and then switch work and do and like upload multiple sites information. You can go directly from this checklist right into Qualtrics. There could be some efficiency there for folks. Now going back to new data guidelines, the next question that's important to answer, because it's been asked, is whether or not an inspection should be conducted. You can get to that answer by going through the recommended assessment process for each performance standard. But also there's kind of a cheat sheet area in the introduction to this document that we'll go to first. Answering, should I conduct an inspection? There's straightforward answers for each sample point type. And for Silurian bedrock sites, no. An on-site inspection or in-field observations is not a recommendation from the NPRA project team. I'm going to go back and cover the but in response to that statement. So if you feel as a county that additional compliance verification beyond what the research project has recommended in this document is appropriate. So if you feel like more is appropriate to assess compliance with this performance standard. We discussed a couple options on what else folks might do. Could be additional NMP document review to affirm that the NMP is being implemented as written, or it could be on-site observations to affirm that the NMP is being implemented as written. 2 examples. The new data guidelines document is a series of recommendations for this, but there's a good deal of professional deference given to the counties making these assessments. And if you feel like doing something a little bit different is prudent, counties certainly can do that. And Qualtrics, the way it's designed, is going to be set up to allow counties to input those compliance determinations, and then it's going to follow it up with, well, what did you do to make that assessment? Did you review an NMP? Did you conduct on-site inspections, etc.? So as long as you're answering both questions of that, we'll be able to do, we'll still have a quality analysis project at the end of this. So that wraps up the Silurian Bedrock tutorial we're hoping to do here. We learned which performance standard we're assessing, when you should request an NMP, and that inspections are not a recommended component of this assessment. Coming up next, we're going to do the same kind of setup for our cropland and livestock operations sites. So stay tuned for those tutorials, and thank you so much.